Welcome once again to a Daily Academy podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Scott Mail. We got Sports 25 to life. Talking about GPP tournament strategy for your NFL contests for this year and every other year for the upcoming season. So we're going to get you ready, give you the idea what you're looking for, what you're not looking for, and maybe some things that you wouldn't think you would need but are going to be helpful. So why don't you give us a rundown here of your GPP tournament strategy?
Yeah, like we talked about in cash games, what you're looking for in GPPs is more the ceiling than the guy's actual projection. And that's a lot tougher to get, which is what makes GPPs a lot of fun. Because it's a lot harder to accurately project the ceiling than a guy's average score. We talked about in cash games quite a bit that volume was the big thing there. And while that's great in GPPs, the overall productivity of the player is much more important, and his overall upside. One guy that I always talk about when I talk about GPPs and have for as long as Daily Fantasy's been around really is Deshaun Jackson. He's one of the examples I use in the article. He's a guy that if you take a look at his graph, I mean, it's basically like a giant zigzag of 20-point games down to 0-point games, back up to 25-point games, back down to 3-point games. This is exactly the type of player you want to target in tournaments because the really ugly 0-point games, which I believe he had 4 of them last year, really keep his price down and allow you to build better lineups around a guy that can also win you a lot of money by himself. Because he's the type of guy that can easily have a 140-yard, 2-touchdown game on 5 targets, where for other guys to rack up those kind of numbers, they need 12, 15 targets a lot of times. And there just aren't guys at that price range that you can get like Deshaun Jackson that has that kind of upside. Where if you're looking for massive volume guys that are going to rack up those kind of numbers, they're probably going to cost 60% more, if not just flat out double what Deshaun Jackson costs. And those are the type of players you're going to want to target in GPPs all the time. Finding those players at a discount is a big part of the game because throughout the season you'll see, I'll just use Deshaun Jackson, continue to use him as an example here. He did have one nice 4-week span where he scored, I think, 15 or more DraftKings points in 4 or 5 games. And his price was really high at that point. And the very next game, I don't think he scored above 6 fantasy points 3 games in a row after that. So then his price came down. He came back out with a 16-point week. So when you're looking at a guy like that, you want to target him after his bad weeks instead of after his good ones, where a lot of people will do the opposite. They'll see a guy put up a really big game where he had an 80-yard touchdown catch or something, and then they'll go and pay for him the next week hoping he's going to do the exact same thing. And more often than not, that's not what you're getting from a guy like him, where the defense that he's playing the next week looks at that and they see the plays that he got open on, and they're going to make adjustments to that to prevent those big plays. And it's going to be a while before he gets another one sometimes. So finding the guys that when they're at their price valleys is a really big important part of GPP play, because you're trying to swerve from the field as much as possible, and pretty often the field is doing exactly what we just talked about, and chasing big games. My other example in the article is a perfect example of that. Ben Roethlisberger in Week 8 last year had a 6-touchdown game. Then helped everyone out and followed it up with a 4-touchdown game and about 350 yards in Week 9. But then his price was up there with a lot of the elite guys, like when Tom Brady was playing well last year, and I think he was up near Aaron Rodgers for a while on most of the main DFS sites. And then for the 2 weeks after that, he scored, I think, 14 and 13 fantasy points. And so he's being heavily played at a big price and scoring nothing, where if you had played him weeks 6, 7, 8, and 9, you're getting a massive amount of production for a really cheap price. And so instead of chasing the big games, you really want to find guys that have big games coming. And while that's a really hard thing to do, looking at past performance from guys like Roethlisberger and Deshaun Jackson, we've seen them do this throughout their careers. And so that's one great thing about having veterans is you know their past and the fact that they have upside, even though they haven't been showing it lately. Prior to that 6-touchdown game by Roethlisberger, I think he only had 1 game above 20 fantasy points prior to that. But everyone knew that upside was there. He has weapons on his team like Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell and guys like that. And he's just in a good situation to succeed at different times throughout the season. It's just hard to predict when they'll be. And those are the exact type of guys that are going to win GPPs for you.
Yeah, and that's a great point with the ownership percentages. You know, if you chase everything with the big games and everyone else is chasing it too, you would just end up with the same players that the rest of the field has, and that's never going to help you in a tournament ever, in any sport, really. So, all right, great points there. Check out the rest of our Daily Academy videos, and we'll see you next time.